Hi everyone, my name is Siyabonga Siphepelo Mdluli. I will be your lecturer for Economic History 303, that's ECHS 303 in this first semester. Now this is our first video, so this is our first theme, which is the intellectual roots of development. So by now the readings pertaining to this theme are already posted on Moodle, so I would suggest students that they visit Moodle and download the readings and do the readings, read and make sure that you take some notes and make notes of your own, because this video is a summary of all the readings that are covered on theme 1. The list of readings are also available on your course outline, so I'd suggest that you familiarize yourself with the course outline, download it and know which readings are for which theme. So in this theme 1, we'll be focusing on 3 major topics. Our first topic will be the origins of development economics. How did development economics emerge in the development paradigm? So we'll be discussing on how it was traced to the need for the industrialization in Eastern Europe, especially after the Second World War, which saw a lot of countries in that Eastern Europe section, a lot of economies were in disarray, so they needed to drive industrialization so they can boost their economies, or they can create economic growth and economic development. But there were also previous research studies conducted in the 1930s and 1940s in Latin America that we'll also look at. Our second topic will be the origins of sociological and political development theories. So in this section, we'll be looking at highlights of theories from Auguste Comte, Emile Durkheim, Karl Marx, and Max Weber. So if some of you did modules in sociology and or in community development, you would have come across some of these sociological and political development theories. Our last topic in this theme 1 will be the emergence of development theory, which was mostly concerned with catching up to industrialized economies, and we'll be also looking at some challenges to the development theory, which also led to the emergence of other theories such as modernization theory, the structuralist theory, and the dependency theory. Okay, so there were 8 theoretical earlier studies during the European colonization of Latin America, Africa, and Asia. By atheoretical, we mean that these studies were not based on or concerned with theory, but were rather concerned with how to industrialize colonies in Latin America, Africa, and Asia, as decolonization was looming after the Second World War. So we know that after the Second World War, countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America were going through a decolonization process, and development theory, development economics, was seen as a short-term solution on how to boost industrialization in these countries so that economic development can occur. As a result, there were no schools of thought for method and theory construction in development economics. Development economics was seen as largely ahistorical and also had a political partisanship, meaning that countries or scholars who were drivers of development theory had a huge stake in the Cold War, and this in turn created a bit of challenges for development economics itself. However, there were studies of European societies that were methodologically conscious and that were generalized as well, meaning that countries in European societies were able to adopt a one-glove-fits-all development approach to drive industrialization after the Second World War. And now these studies, they formed a major theoretical heritage of development research. So our main focus are 2 streams that emerged in the 20th century. These 2 streams are development economics and socio-political development theories. Now, development economics is a branch of economics focused on improving fiscal, economic, and social conditions in developing countries. And as for socio-political development theories, we'll later learn of these theories and their origins in the field of sociology, including those theories of Emile Durkheim, Karl Marx, and Max Weber. Okay, when we look at the theoretical origins of development economics, we must first look at the context in which development economics first emerged, or its first appearance, which was the decolonization context. That was a period after the Second World War where ex-colonies were starting to decolonize. We see the countries such as India and Egypt and other countries in Latin America starting to decolonize after the Second World War. So development economics, its main aim was to provide grounds for immediate action and a desire to assist developing countries of the ex-colonies. Now, the initial view by development theorists was that industrialization in developing countries would lead to economic growth. This was because of a fundamental assumption that industrialized countries were rich because of their industrial development, while developing countries were mostly poor because they had not attained high level of industrialization. Now, just keep in mind of this point, because later on your essay, you'll be asked to write about why other countries are rich whilst others are poor. So keep this point in mind. Now, also, development economists were mostly interested in uncovering the root causes of poverty and underdevelopment or stagnation in developing countries, mostly in the third world. So while other countries were rich and others were poor, as theorists and as development economists, they were interested in finding out the root causes of poverty and underdevelopment and what is causing the stagnation, or why are these countries in the third world not becoming as rich as the countries in the Western world. So the main focus, or what they mainly focused on, were the sources of and obstacles to long-term economic growth. So these development economists also focused on or paid attention to the internal factors as sources of and barriers to economic growth. By internal factors, we mean factors such as fiscal policy, savings and investments, and physical capital in the developing countries, and also natural resources. So the focus on finding out if these internal sources are the barriers to economic growth. Now, there are classical political economic roots of both economics and development economics. These are people like Adam Smith, who wrote extensively about the invisible hand and stated that the invisible hand was like an unseen force moving the free market economy. And this actually translates to through individual self-interest and freedom of production and consumption, the best interests of the society as a whole are fulfilled. So for an example, if maybe you decide to purchase a car, through your self-interest and freedom of production that you can purchase a car, or self-interest that you want to purchase a car, the whole society's best interest are actually fulfilled, because that car that you are going to purchase is actually built somewhere by laborers, and the parts are actually made from natural resources. So there's a movement of goods and movement of capital between companies that make all the pieces that form a vehicle and that you end up driving. So by your self-interest, you actually, the whole society actually benefits, because there's a lot of hands that actually swap capital and goods and so on, and there's a lot of labor also included in making a car. So the whole of society ends up benefiting from what you decide to do. And then there's also the theory of comparative advantage by David Ricardo, which actually is the ability to produce particular goods or services at a lower opportunity cost than other trading partners. So there were countries that were able to produce certain goods or to provide certain services at a lower cost than other countries. So that puts those countries at a comparative advantage. Now, there were other classical political economists which had a great influence on development economics and development research. These included Thomas Roberts Malthus and John Stuart Mill. Now, some of you would have heard of these political economists either in political science modules or sociology modules or community development modules. Malthus had a theory on population growth, and that theory believed that population growth would always outrun food production, meaning that population as it grows, it would always increase rapidly than food supply. This meant that large numbers of people would always suffer from starvation and poverty. On the other hand, Mill focused on the principles of political economy, which included production, distribution, exchange, and the influence of government, such as taxation. Now, these political economists, their emphasis was greatly on generalization and abstraction, meaning that creating processes for facilitating a specific problem and focusing on a broader solution. So they would look at the problem and also come up with suggestions or solutions to that problem. For an example, population growth, Malthus stated that in order to manage population growth, there had to be measures put in place such as famine, disease, and so on. So these classical political economies intentions have been passed down to present-day development research through three main streams of thinking. These included Karl Marx, Joseph Schumpeter, and other contributions by the neoclassical paradigm of Alfred Marshall, Walras Samuelson, and others. You'll further learn in later theories that these main streams of thinking actually inspired other theories or other theorists in dependency theory and in the growth and modernization theories and so on. Karl Marx believed in labor theory of value to explain the relative difference in market prices. And meanwhile, Schumpeter came up with the theory of economic development, which saw the processes of production as being marked by a contribution of material and immaterial production forces. So further looking at the origins of development economics, we look at the work by John Maynard Keynes, who was seen as the father of development economics. Keynes provided a macroeconomic theory of total spending in the economy and its effects on output, employment, and inflation. This theory actually advocated for the increase in government expenditure and lower taxes to stimulate demand, hence lifting the economy out of depression. So his main theme or his main focus on the economic theory was that government should spend more, reduce taxes. This would actually stimulate demand and would lift economies out of depression. What was at the time seen as a Keynesian economic model actually inspired the formation of the IMF and the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank at the end of the Second World War. These were seen as the Bretton Woods institutions in such a case that they were formed at the Bretton Woods Conference by ideas of John Maynard Keynes himself with the goal of restructuring the monetary system. So for the second section of our theme 1, we'll be focusing on the origins of sociological and political development theories. Now, it was Auguste Comte who came up with the theory of positivism, which holds that society, like the physical world, operates according to general laws. So there were other comprehensive contributions that appeared later from Emile Durkheim, Karl Marx, and Max Weber. Now, Emile Durkheim explored the social consequences of the division of labor as part of the industrialization process. In the meanwhile, Karl Marx focused on political, social, and ideological relations and institutions. So, in essence, Durkheim believed that as societies advanced, they make the transition from mechanical to organic solidarity. And meanwhile, for Karl Marx, he believed that society exists in terms of class conflict. So with the rise of capitalism, the workers themselves become alienated from themselves and others in society. Max Weber, on the other hand, only advanced opposing views and would not assign any primacy to the economic process. And meanwhile, Talcott Parsons introduced functionalism, which was a structural theory which sees social structures or the organization of society as more important than the individual. So he was more interested in analyzing the social structures themselves as the unit of analysis rather than the individual as the unit of analysis. So Parsons also viewed the society as a system. So all aspects of society, that's including institutions, the roles, the norms, and the values, and etc., served a purpose and are crucial for the long-term survival of the society. So in these sociological and political development theories, they led to the three streams that had a major influence on development. The first stream was functionalism and anthropological field methods, which in essence focused on cultural institutions that made up society and their social functions and their contribution to the overall social stability. The second stream was functionalism and modernization theory, which focused on the development of societies and suggests that traditional societies will develop as they adopt more modern practices. Now, this is often debatable as modernization theories were mostly uh, created by Western scholars, and the term modern is very debatable, especially when you look at African societies. What is modern to us might not be modern to them, and what is modern to them might not be modern to us as Africans, vice versa. So their modernity was based on what American or Western countries have gone through, and they stated that for other countries, for poor and underdeveloped countries, in order for them to reach the state of modernity, they have to follow what Western countries have followed. And the third stream that emerged from the sociological and political development theories was the post-Marxist theories that not only focused on class conflicts of the classical political economists such as Karl Marx, but they also revealed racial, sexual, class, and ethnic divisions of modern Western society. So our third and final section of Theme 1 will be focusing on the emergence of the development theory. As a theory that emerged in the 1950s, it was there to deal with narrower issues, namely how economies of the colonies of Britain, France, Portugal, and other European countries might be transformed and made more productive as decolonization was approaching. So it was mostly focused or concerned with narrower issues of catching up with industrial economies, how these countries of Latin America, Africa, and Asia would catch up to industrialized economies. And as previously stated, that development theory presented itself as an atheoretical and ahistorical body of knowledge, meaning that it did not acknowledge existing body of theory about development. But this was due to its strong practical orientation, meaning that it was there to provide grounds for immediate action after the Second World War. So it was there to assist countries that had been affected by the Second World War, especially the Eastern European countries, on how they could develop their economies, and also to assist countries that were about to go through the decolonization phase, which is countries in Latin America, Asia, and Africa. Also, the new nations being a prime stake in the Cold War. So Western theorists, they avoided acknowledging earlier studies of sociological and political development, studies such as Karl Marx, who were viewed by the US government as communist work, and by these scholars, they avoided acknowledging such work because those days, during the Cold War, such acknowledgement would actually cost you your job. Also, there was also the issue of the Bretton Woods financial and trading regime. Those were the creation of the IMF and the World Bank after the Second World War, which permitted governments to manage their own economies. That's including maximizing growth and employment, determining the interest rates, fixing exchange rates, and taxing and spending as they saw fit to secure national and economic objectives. So there were also some challenges to the development theory that were exposed at the end of the 1950s, especially in the Indian economy, where there was a failure for the Indian economy to respond to the development approach. So what occurred was that India, after gaining independence, prioritized industrialization over agriculture. And as most economists at the time were stating that if countries want to improve their economies, they needed to focus their labor on industrialization and move their labor from agriculture to industrialization. But as it occurred in India, the Indian state, it lacked capacity to enforce national interests and policies pertaining to industrialization. They had a lot of SOEs, state-owned entities that were opened, but had no capacity to ensure that those SOEs actually provided growth and employment in the economy. So this led to the emergence of the modernization theory as an American response. But this theory also suffered from its defects due to its association with the Cold War. So while America was in the Cold War, the modernization theory was actually used as a tool of combating communism. There were also some other shortcomings that were noticed in Latin America, which had been independent for over a century, but still did not witness any growth according to the modernization theory. So these shortcomings led to the emergence of the structuralist and dependency theories. Now, the structuralist economists viewed the economic structure as a kind of steel frame which cannot be easily changed. So the economy actually consisted of hard, specific pieces of capital goods and individuals trained in specific skills and located in specific areas. Meanwhile, dependency theorists, they criticized the modernization paradigm and stated that resources flowed from a periphery of poor developing countries to a core of wealthy developed states or countries, and in turn enriching wealthy states at the expense of poor and developing states. So that's the end of our theme 1. Our theme 1 is based on these two readings. So it's John Martinusson's reading. And if you want a broader view of the evolution of the development theory, you can see the reading by Colin Lays. So I'd suggest that students just download these readings and make sure that you read, take notes. If you have any further questions regarding this theme, or there is something that you did not understand, please make notes after this video, write them down, and we'll discuss it on our critical engagement when we meet on our Zoom meeting. Thank you very much.